Right, okay, so I think we'll get started. Apologies for the delay, we're just kind of getting all set up. So I want to welcome you to the final panel session for today. This is known as the Fire Sprite panel because everyone here is from Fire Sprite. And we're joined by some fantastic graduates of the Games Academy. I taught all these people once upon a time. And now they're industry colleagues, so it's really good seeing them back. So I'm going to introduce myself again. My name is Brian O'Donnell. I'm the head of subjects for the Games Academy. I'm charge of all the games programs, and even though I can't draw at all, the games art programs. So that's quite funny. And what we're going to do today, just very similar to the last panel, I'm going to ask some questions and turn it over to you and do this back and forth bit of dialogue. It's very relaxed, so please answer any questions. But just to let you know, the panel are working on stuff they might not be able to talk about. They're under NDA and various other things, so they may unfortunately not be able to answer every single question that you ask, but we'll try to generalize as much as possible. If we do answer a question we're not meant to, I think there's some snipers that are going to take us all out. So just please don't do that. Yeah, there's sort of red dots appearing, so just don't put us in an awkward position. So, first of all, I'm just going to turn it over to the panel to introduce themselves. So can you please just give us your name, who you work for, even though I've just done that already, your role, and when you graduated from Falmouth. So start with Charlie.
Yeah, should I use the microphone?
Whatever's
Yeah, I mean, I'm really quiet, so I use this. I'm Charlie. I graduated in 2019 on the design course. I was in the design unit of the Games Academy, graduated in 2019, and now I work for Fire Sprite as a junior level designer on the, and I can say this, I'm on the Horizon Call of the Mountain project. So that's me.
Nice. I'm Oscar. I graduated in the 2018 cohort from the game design group. I currently work as a junior dev manager at Fire Sprite, which is just a different term for producer.
Hello, I am Miles. I graduated in 2020, gang. I was on the game art course and I'm now a junior UI artist also at Fire Sprite.
Excellent, so thank you very much. So one thing I wanted just to start this from is just to kind of briefly speak about how you got to where you are. So how did you get the job? How did you find it? What were some of the sort of challenges? So I'll start with Charlie and we'll just go through.
Yeah, sure. So after I graduated, it was I had some time in Falmouth, and I just sort of spent a lot of time in coffee shops, like working on my resume, working on my portfolio a little bit, using the stuff I did from the course as the main pieces, and had a couple of interviews, a couple of design tests. They were all very different from one another, but then I got my last design test, which then became successful employment at Fire Sprite. And yeah, they were fun. They were fun challenges. Design tests and tests in general are something that you probably run into. And then not long after that, I moved back to, up to Liverpool, and that's where I've been working for the past couple of years.
Oscar?
Yeah, my journey's been a bit weird in getting to Fire Sprite. In the second year, between second year and third year of uni, I had a 5-month internship with Antimatter doing production. So in my third year, I did that as well, helped the team with production stuff, and applied for a lot of jobs in production, different roles, associate producer and assistant producer, and all of those titles that changed from studio to studio. But no luck really, because there were some gaps in my fundamental understanding of Scrum and Agile. So I went on to the Launchpad program, did that for a year and really skilled up, spent a lot of time learning everything, researching on my own, and really figuring out where my knowledge gaps were. Filled them up and applied for jobs. I met one person who I had worked with at Antimatter, who worked at Fire Sprite, put in a good word and said there was open positions, so I applied for that, and joined Firesprite in July of 2020.
Excellent. And then Miles?
I freelanced during my last year of university on a mobile game called The Glass Ceiling Games, which has a Kickstarter right now that you should definitely look at. But in my third year, I spent a lot of time, like anyone, just applying for stuff, interviews, art tests. My team, some of them are here and will tell you that I did disappear for weeks at a time to work on art tests. I didn't get any of those jobs. Then in the middle of the summer, I got contacted by a recruiter out of the blue, like, hi, we're hiring for a UI artist. Applied, interviewed, got the job within a week. I think what's kind of funny though is all of us we got to Firesprite completely separately, and there's like 3 more graduates as well from here who are all there. Every single one of us got there completely independently. I just think it's funny noting. But yeah, portfolio is also as well, mostly my stuff from the course here, second year game, third year game. Very bog standard, got the job in, I think my interviews were in June 2020 and then started in August 2020 because I had to finish up the freelance work first.
Cool, thank you very much. It is basically kind of surprising we've got an enclave of Games Academy students at Firesprite. I think we should open up like a Games Academy Liverpool now, just to kind of, we could actually start that off right now. So this is kind of just going off some of the things you were mentioning. Both of you mentioned tests. Could you maybe elaborate on what those tests were like? Because obviously the Games Academy, we talk about CV, portfolio, but tests are something that we don't really touch on as much. So, Miles, do you want to start maybe talk about one of the arts tests you maybe did, or some experiences there?
So, funny, when I got my job offer for Firesprite, I didn't do an art test for Firesprite, and it was at the same time as I got a job offer from another company as well, which I didn't get an art test from. All of the interviews prior that I'd done that I had art tests for, I didn't get a job offer for. So I wonder what that says about me. But art tests that I've had, from the perspective of, I've always applied for UI. I knew by like midway through second year that I wanted to do UI art as my specialism, have ranged from, can you do 2 full screens in 2 weeks to these specifications? We'll give you a list of what we want the screens to include. The style's up to you. To a mobile company wanted me to do, I think, something like 5 different menu screens following a specific style and creating a logo. And I say that very rarely because I genuinely think that art tests are very predatory in many ways. They're demanding a lot of time and effort and energy from you without pay, without compensation for the chance at a job. And when you're more established career-wise, you have the freedom to say no to that, because although at the graduate level, it's a very, very crowded industry and it's very difficult to get a job. Once you get to mid to senior level, there's actually not that many candidates for most specialisms, I would say. So it is, you do generally have the freedom to say, no, I'm not going to do this without compensation because I don't have the time. At a graduate level, you kind of have to take those chances on though. The best art test I had was actually with Playground Games. I did not succeed at that one. They were right to reject me. I don't think my quality of work was very good. But they asked for, again, 2 different menu screens, but they gave me as much time as I needed. They also gave me feedback at the end of it, which is kind of the big thing that I would say if you're doing any sort of art or level or programming tests, any of it, ask them for feedback afterwards of, okay, if you said no, why is it that you said no? What is it that I could have done better? What is it that you didn't see in my work? If they are demanding that much energy from you, it is the least that the company can spend the time to do in return.
Say Charlie then Oscar. So Charlie, do you want to talk about some of the design tests you took?
Yeah, sure. I mean, with design tests, it's pretty much just showing how your mind works, really. A lot of the time you'll have an assignment. So look at a game, deconstruct it, make a level for it. What would you change? What would you add? Stuff like that. It's very much focused on showing your thought process more than anything. Or like the end result is still super important, but I mean, for a lot of design interviews in general, including the tests, it is like, how does your mind work? Like, how are you coming to these conclusions? What are you considering? What are you thinking about? Yeah, I had some really enjoyable ones, but Miles is correct. Like, nowadays, it should be good to push for compensation and leverage that a little bit, especially if they're demanding and asking for a lot. I think both of the ones I did lasted around a week. Yeah, they were a week or so. And they both led to interviews, and during those interview times had plenty of time to go over feedback. Yeah, just push for the feedback in those interviews and make sure they get it. I think in both instances when I did tests, they did have the test up just to talk about it at a segment in the interview, but I guess not all ones are going to do that. So
yeah, I mean, because in my case, what happened, one of the really odd one I had was the mobile studio, where again, it was like essentially a full menu system. If it wasn't as established a studio as it was, I would have thought they were trying to get free work from me. But yeah, then it doesn't lead to an interview, so you don't get that feedback unless you explicitly email, like, cool, you said no, why? But I would also say for art ones as well, it is a lot about how you're thinking. The end result is important, the polish, the quality of work that you're able to get on a quick turnaround, because games industry is quick. It's fast-paced a lot of times, you are working quickly. It is also, though, how is it that you think, how is it that you work independently? Are we going to be able to trust you to examine the brief that you're given, work to specification, how is it that you get from point A to point B? And that was one of the things that I was told I did do well, was breaking down my process and the work structure alongside that. It's kind of like in maths classes when they're like, can you show us the steps you get? Break down the problem step by step. They want to see that for every aspect of games, I think.
So, Oscar, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, production's a weird one. I have had production tests, and they have been relevant to the job, but most of the time, production doesn't really have the same type of tests, because it's not really about your output, it's about how do you increase the output of everyone else, right? So a lot of the times it's more based off of the interviews that you have and how you can sell yourself. So a lot of the times it's more about, have you had experience leading a 7-person team, a 20-person team, a 3-person team? And if not, can you understand what the differences would be between running a sprint retrospective in a 3-person team versus a 20-person team, right? Like, the processes have to be different, and as long as you can reason yourself through that and talk about how you would do things, why you prefer certain things, you should be generally fine for most production tests.
Excellent, thank you very much. So now I'm going to throw up out to the audience to see if we've got any initial questions. I'm sure we've got a mic somewhere. So any questions so far? So we have one over here.
Hi, I know at Firesprite you're working on a lot of different projects and titles. When you apply for jobs at a studio like that, do you get any kind of input which project you would like to be recruited onto, or are you recruited and then assigned to a certain project?
Typically, a short answer is no. That's the short answer. And this will vary from company to company. Firesprite's really good at taking personal considerations in mind when over time, when you're at it, if you have a project you want to work on and you can push for that, talk to your lead, and there generally is a way to make that happen. In terms of when you apply to something, jobs tend to be listed, and this is not specifically to Firesprite, but just in general, jobs tend to be project specific for a specific role that they need. So if there is a UI artist position, for example, it will be because that team specifically needs one. Hiring happens to, or tends to happen segmented within the company and not all at once.
yeah, I think I applied for an open position when I did mine, so it was harder to figure out what exactly that would be, what I'd be assigned to. So it very much is like, depends on the listing, really.
I will say I have been, so I do a few of the interviews now, so I've been on the other side of the screen, and sometimes in interviews for example, there'll be a bunch of one type of job available, but on different teams. So someone will apply for one, and through the interview process and the test, will be like, oh, this person actually would fit better here. And so you'd probably do a third interview and be like, hey, now we're going to loop these guys in and see how they like you, how you like them, and see if you fit better there.
Excellent. Any other questions? Cool, I've got plenty to go on with anyway. So speaking about getting that job, have you got any folio or CV tips that you could give to the audience? I'll open it up to this.
Cut as much fat as you can. Make sure it's all high quality work that you're proud to show and that you can talk about and explain everything you put on it. Yeah, just put good work on it. Yeah, basically.
Put good work on it. And you go, Miles?
I'm updating my portfolio right now because I haven't in 2 years, and I'm like, I should keep on top of that. Something I've seen a lot when looking at student portfolios recently is it takes me 2 or 3 or 4 clicks to actually see a project. I want, like, universally across any discipline, I would like your first page of your portfolio to have in a grid, here's like a thumbnail of the projects I have worked on. It shouldn't take me more than 1 click to be able to see your work. This is true across any discipline. Like, even if it's something like audio where I will have to click a video to hear your work, that's fine, but I need to know who you are, what it is that you're working on, like what your specialism is, what kind of experience you do have, just like that. And even for, I don't know, something like art, unfortunately, is really subject to like that 10-second glance. Okay, I have literally stared at your portfolio for a blink and I see that you're not what I want, and that sucks a lot. But other disciplines as well, that maybe you're prepared to invest more time into looking at a portfolio. Like programming, for example, I know that it'll take me some time to look through a portfolio and see if the candidates is suitable because I can't look and see I can't look and see how they've implemented something, right? In a way that, like, I can look at an art piece for 2 seconds. I still want to see that you've worked on games, though, right? I still want to see that, like, here is an image thumbnail of the project that I have made and worked on. I think that's just a really big thing. People, especially at the graduate level, again, you get hundreds of candidates for the same roles. If they can't find your work immediately, they're just going to move on to the next person. I would also say as well, have different levels of how much you break down your project. So it might be worth having one project which is like full case study, here's my 30-year game, and here's everything I did, and here's the different processes, here's what it looked like 7 months ago, here's what it looks like now. And then it might also be worth, alongside that, just like, here's a smaller condensed project that I can look at in 10 seconds and understand what you did. Also, with team-based projects, highlight what it is specifically that you were responsible for. So again, in my case, for example, it's the UI art. In my second year game, though, there were aspects of the UI art that I didn't do. So I made sure to really clearly say, like, this person did this. It does come up in interviews. People will look at the project that you've got in your portfolio, and they'll ask you to explain what your work is on it, what your thought process was. If you get to that point and they're asking you about something that you didn't actually work on, but you've maybe taken a bit more credit for than you should, that will come out in the interview and you're not going to get the role. So just be very clear about what specifically you were responsible for as well. And also it's just useful for them to know, like, cool, you have experience in this specific thing and therefore you're suitable for the job and we want to interview you.
Yeah, and show finished work. It's like, if showing off things like sketches or unfinished models is fine if you can show what that became, right? Like, when I click your portfolio, I need to see this is what it is. If I want to see more about it,
I think that was me.
I think the one thing that is also important to remember in a student environment is a lot of the times we give each other roles within the team that is really difficult to convey the value that it's had without sounding like you think you're the best in the world, right? So, for example, if you are in a large team, let's say you have 5 artists on your team and you have someone who is the lead artist on the team, you need to be really careful about the way you phrase that on your CV and your portfolio, because calling yourself a lead artist has a lot of connotations. That means that you've gone through junior, mid-level, senior, and then you've gone on to manage people for a living. So, like, you need to be careful about the terms you use. It's great to say I led the artist team on a student project, or I was the lead artist on a student project, but don't say I have been a lead artist.
Yeah, I just have some other little bits to add to that. Like with something like level design in particular, make sure you show gameplay of you playing your level rather than just a couple of screenshots of it. very, very important. There's a lot of portfolios that don't do that. Definitely essential. And I guess like on the topic of like being able to find your work as quick as possible, make sure your CV is accessible too. Don't put stuff like progress bars on it and stuff like that. You see that with a lot of CVs and it's really bad and really unprofessional. You can't quantify on like a number out of 10 how good you are at something. You just need to say you have experience doing this thing. It's really surprising how many people you see doing that, and it's very easy to bin a CV when you see something like that. Just no progress bars, don't do that. Not good.
Because realistically, right, like you're coming into a junior position, all those progress bars should be at 2. If you have something on 7 or 10, that is a genuine red flag for an employer because you are not an expert on any subject matter at all. You've specialized, hopefully, which is great, and so you have a head start there and can come in and hit the ground running. But like progress bars, just don't.
There's so much to talk about with portfolios and CVs. One thing that anyone who does go to the Games Academy has, which as it turns out a lot of universities don't do, you have been working in multidisciplinary teams and specialized in specific subjects. That's something you can and should highlight, and I would use that exact phrasing of like, I was the artist in a multidisciplinary game project working with other programmers and designers and stuff is similar, because that's the kind of stuff that it is really shockingly similar to actual industry practice in a lot of ways. Like, we do stand-ups, we do agile methodology, all this stuff. And I know that in all the interviews that I did get to, that was the thing that people were really impressed by, was like, oh, you weren't just there a student trying to do every single discipline all at once and calling it design. You actually specialized in one specific thing. This is also going to vary, and like, again, we're all coming from AAA context, like it's a Sony studio, all that jazz, etc., which cares a lot about specialization. Indie studios might want that value of like, I can do several different things. But it is worth highlighting, like, I was in a team environment and I did my thing working with other people together.
And specifically for production here is, if you want to put on your production portfolio or CV, really, because we don't have portfolios, but if you want to put in that you know Agile, you need to read up on it and not just take the experience you have here as I now know Agile, because Agile is so much more than just having scrums. It's more than having just sprint reviews, sprint planning. There's sprint prioritization, there's sprint retrospectives, there's just sprints on being on 2 weeks, a month, and then there's just so much more to know about everything from user stories, and there's a whole world out there. So be aware that all the experience you get here is like, it's enough to be familiar with concepts, but it is the starting stone. So anything you want to be like, I know this, go read up on it more and really do understand and know it.
Thank you very much. One of the things that was mentioned was interviews, and Oscar, you said that you've kind of now stepped onto the interviewing side. So I would like to, because it's something we don't actually speak about often, is that interview, what it's like, and what are some of the kind of experiences you've had and some of the tips you may have. So maybe start with Oscar from both sides, the interviewer and the interviewee. So could you maybe talk about some tips for interviews? Maybe talk about some things to kind of look out for, and potentially, some red flags that, you might not want to kind of touch on in interviews. Oscar?
My one big tip for interviews, no matter what company it is stop, breathe, think, take a sip of water before you answer. If you're struggling with something and you can't think of it, it's easy to ramble or try and come up with a quick answer or solution. But if you do find yourself kind of taken off foot, right, pause, think, and you can sit there in silence for like almost a minute before the other person will be like, hey, are you okay? You have time to think about your answers.
Anyone else you want to go next?
To add on that, it's okay to just say, hi, I'm nervous, can you give me a minute? Because everyone who is interviewing you has also been interviewed before, and they know that it's nerve-wracking. But also to add to that, if you've gotten to an interview, they're really a hassle to conduct. Like, in a studio, you're trying to work, right? But the people who are interviewing you are also trying to work, and they have to take time out of their day to do this. Well, they probably just want to be getting to work on the bug or making this level or whichever, which means that if they've taken the time and set aside the time to interview you, it is because they want reason to hire you, right? They're coming into this from the perspective of, I want to hire this person because it will be a waste of my time if I don't. Which is a really good thing for you as the candidate. It means you can come into that, like know they want you if they're interviewing you. It does happen sometimes where like we have to show that we've interviewed 10 different people and couldn't find somebody so that we can justify hiring this specific candidate. But that's a lot more rare than the context of, no, we want to hire this person. And tied to that, they're really just conversations. It's going to vary a bit from studio to studio, but like, we're not in law or medicine or anything like that. It's just people chatting, wanting to get to know you. I would research basic questions. Something that caught me really off guard with the candidate was, again, UI artist. We asked them what their favorite UI in a game was, and they didn't have an answer, which I get you're put on the spot, but then I'm sitting there like, okay, so does this mean that you haven't done the research for your own role kind of thing? Do you not have the appropriate context to be able to answer this question? So do take the time to like make a list of whatever, here's 10 questions I think could come up and have an answer. And even right now when remote interviews are so common, you can't literally just have those answers on a piece of paper and kind of glance at them. If your mind does blank like, oh God, I don't know what the answer to this is, congrats, you have your list there to reference.
Charlie?
Yeah, I had that exact situation of being very nervous during my on-site interview with Firesprite, and I was given some time to think. I was able to collect myself a little bit, and it worked really well. Obviously, like you said, Miles, every studio has a completely different process on how they interview people, and people have their preferences. My preference is definitely interviews where it does just feel like a chat with the people that you're being interviewed by, because, again, you're trying to show them how your mind works, and if you can keep a toe-to-toe conversation with someone on the development team and have a good discussion about your role, that's incredibly valuable, and they want people that can have those conversations. A lot of your day-to-day is chatting with people and coming up with solutions to problems. Yeah, just don't be nervous, especially if you pass a level design test or a design test or a test. A test? Look, I'm an idea. If you get an on-site interview after passing a test, it's even more likely that they really, really want you and they really like you. So keep that as a confidence boost. It's very good.
Something I did before each of the interviews that I have felt have been successful when I was being interviewed was literally 10 minutes before the interview starts. I sit down on a PC, make sure that audio works, video works, and then I literally watch a Don't Laugh video so that I'm coming into that interview having just laughed, smiling, and that's the mood I'm in, and being able to say hi and be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm in a good mood. If the interview goes down from there, then that's what happens, but at least I can come in and bring positive energy, right?
Excellent, thank you very much, John. Does anyone have any questions for the panel? So we have one here, and then one in the middle, and then another one in the middle. So, that one first.
Hi. I was wondering, in regards to interviews and things like that, how do you balance wanting to show off the best of your abilities while at the same time going into it knowing, you're a beginner, you don't know everything there is to know, you'll never know everything there is to know. How do you balance that?
In terms of production, what I did, I genuinely said in my interview that I've learned, I think, everything I can on my own. And for me to grow, I think I need to enter the industry into a junior position, and because I've filled all the gaps I am aware I have, so I need to find the gaps I haven't found, right? It's completely fine to go in there and say, like, I think I've grown as much as I can, right? Which is why I've come to you guys, because I want to grow more. You guys are going to help me grow more. Because it's not about, like, I'm the best at what I do, hire me, and it's not about saying I don't know anything. It's like you say, I know the stuff I know, but I'm also very painfully aware that I know nothing.
Miles?
It's also something you can show at the end of the interview. They will always ask you if you have any questions, which that's the other tip I should have said. Write down lists of questions to ask because it shows that you care, and that's cool. But that's also the kind of place where you can show that stuff. So one of the things I was asking in my interviews was, do you guys have a UI team that I can learn from? Because if I'm going into a studio job, I want to know that I will get that mentorship because, again, I feel like I've learned everything that I can on my own. I don't know, it's kind of like, how do you be humble? How do you be confident? It's the same in an interview as it is in any other situation. Don't be egotistic, but don't put yourself down. And as well, it's okay to be confident in your work. Like, I still think that my 30-year game was the sickest thing ever. It's so good. I'm so proud of it. It was great. And like, no, it's not AAA quality, but I'm confident in the work that I did for that project. And I do believe that that's a skill set that got me a job, right? Junior roles, it's worth being aware that, like, they are still looking for people who are good at what they do. And I don't mean this to scare anyone off, but if you are getting hired, it is because you are at a professional level. And a lot of the times the difference between a junior and mid-level isn't necessarily the quality of their work, but the speed at which they work at or the responsibilities they take alongside that work. So if you're at the point where you are showcasing a skill set that is getting you interviews, it is going to be a skill set that's good enough to be proud of, I guess.
Jeremy?
Yeah, it's just a long process of building up trust. The people interviewing you are very likely, 100% likely to have more experience in that industry than you have. So they'll know exactly what kind of level you should be working at for the role you've applied for and the position you've applied for. So don't lie, basically. Again, like you guys have said, just don't be overconfident about it. Just know your stuff, but don't lie about it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Frost?
So this is from kind of like production specific. So in terms of like putting together a production portfolio, kind of what are things you look for and how do you kind of demonstrate that? Because like you said, a lot of the production work is just helping people produce better work. So yeah.
The thing I really look at is, first and foremost, I don't believe there is a such thing as a production portfolio, right? There is no work to show, right? Like, I can show you a calendar view of when people came into work, but like no one's interested in that. So it's really just about saying, showing what your experience has been on the team and what you were responsible for and how you achieved it. So that means, for example, I ran a group of 11 people. I did daily scrums and organized the sprints. I kept track of our Jira or Trello boards. I did sprint retrospectives every 2 weeks, right? It's about making sure that you can communicate the processes and things you've done, and also how they could have been adapted sometimes. So even in a student environment, something that might be worth writing down is like, also had to deal with things like scheduling issues between team members, like setting up meetings when timetables just didn't match up, period, right? Like, timetabling is hard. Like, you guys know, like, timetabling sucks. But so everything that you've done and understand and know, put that down as like things you've done. You can do it as a bullet point on like projects, or you can just do it in a big rambling paragraph. Both will work.
Thank you very much. So we had a question down the front here.
So regarding stuff like the design tests and whatnot to get into an interview, would you say it's like for the majority of interviews? Is it safe to assume that when you're looking for a place that they are going to want one of these design tests, or is it more of a case of there's a couple of studios that want to test you that way, or it's mostly just the interviews?
I don't think I can quantify it really. Most of the interviews I had a test component to them. usually if you want to figure out more about a company's hiring processes, look into stuff like Glassdoor and see what that's been for people. Yeah, like check out Glassdoor, really. You'll have people talking about their interview experience there all the time. It's really hard to tell until you've applied for it and you've got the response. I don't think any of the jobs I applied for said the way they conducted their interview processes and whether or not you were given a test. It just, yeah, either like look up and try to figure out what they do, or just like cross your fingers.
You can also sometimes look up like Naughty Dog design test and see if they have any. People will often take their work for a test for studios and post it, and then you can see, hey, this is exactly the brief they might give you. People shouldn't do this necessarily, but it is stuff you can often find. Like if you literally search studio test, it may come up.
Yeah, because again, they're expecting you to do a week to 2 weeks worth of professional work. So if it was something you did get good feedback on, yeah, that could very much also become portfolio work. If the studio allows it, usually there's some situations where they'll tell you to not republish that work, but in some cases you could. It's just more leverage for you for other interviews and other jobs.
A little tangent on tests and for pretty much every discipline is make sure you read the brief, because sometimes they'll give you 2 weeks but say please don't spend more than 8 hours, and it is very obvious when someone has spent more than 8 hours. And it is always nice to see like, oh, okay, you put in the extra effort, you wanted to impress us, we appreciate that, but there are three things. One, make sure you know when that 8 hour cutoff was and save that and be like, here's what it was at 8 hours, because they're also kind of seeing how fast you are as well. But the other thing is, if you're saying that you're willing to go over the time budget we're giving you now, do I need to worry about you working overtime and hiding that from us in the future, right? So all the things you do in your interview process, it is still kind of part of the interview itself.
Okay, so I'll do one more question and I'll come back to the audience. So I'm going to kind of go off a bit of the kind of prepared questions. So what was the kind of key skill you picked up as a student that you still use today? So I'll throw that out, see who wants to take that one.
I gave this advice to someone today. I'm sorry, I can't remember who you are. But if you can, through the 3 years here at the Games Academy, or however, if you want to go on to the master's program, the skill you need to learn is to go up to someone who is as hostile as possible to you and give them feedback on their work, and at the end of that conversation that they've taken it in. If you can do that at the end of your third year, that's like the boss fight of social, like soft skills. The Dark Souls.
Anyone want to add to that?
UI was the skill I took from Games Academy. But I say that, but I also kind of mean it genuinely in terms of by second year I had an idea of my niche specialism within a specialism that I wanted to do. And then I spent 2 years of my time with the GA focusing on that and within team environments. So I was then able to have 2 fully fledged portfolio pieces where I spent time honing this skill and could point at it and be like, look, I know how to do this thing. Also with UI specifically, something that I see a lot of people do, and I was kind of guilty of this as well, is what happens is you're a 2D artist and then you see that, oh god, concept art is really competitive and so is illustration. I'm going to do user interface instead. You need to still put in the time to actually learn how to do good UI. And UI art as well has art in the title, and it is in many ways more design aligned than it is art aligned. Yeah, which is kind of like the tangent of the original question. But like the skill that you have spent the time working on in the Games Academy is the thing that I carry forward.
Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, regardless of specialism, sort of like what Oscar was saying, soft skills are one of the most important things you'll pick up on this course. Know how to work with people, know how to communicate with people. You do it in the industry all the time, regardless of whether it's indie or AAA. It's one of these skills that will something you'll constantly refer back to. And I know it's something I struggled with for a while, even into the industry. And it's just very good to make sure you get good at that stuff. There's no like magic advice other than just keep talking to people, keep getting that advice from people. Just be a team player, work with people, basically. For level design, learn a 3D package. Just know how to do stuff in 3D. It's very useful. Don't just rely on cubes and Unreal and like terrain placement. Make some modular assets so you can just like place stuff over and over again. Makes it a lot easier when you're like creating spaces, for sure.
Yeah, in terms of soft skills, like you said, in an interview, if someone doesn't have all the skills we require, we can train people to become better artists or better programmers. I can't teach you not to be an asshole.
So, on that note, does anyone have any other questions? Well, should we give him a question?
No.
So, what is the most surprising element of working in a game studio?
In a big one or just in general? Team dynamics will always exist. There's a certain feeling I had at the Games Academy of, okay, some people aren't showing up, some people aren't putting in their all. That'll change when I get into the industry, because then people are taking this seriously. People are people, and it is something you have to deal with. It gets better, far better. Like if people don't show up, that has consequences now. But people are still people, and you do have to deal with them.
How nice everyone is. To try not to be totally positive. Everyone's so friendly. Like, I have so many friends at work, and it was so easy. Like, my first interview with the company, we spent like 20 minutes just talking about the football match because Liverpool had won the previous day. That was literally like 20 minutes of an hour interview. And that kind of attitude's continued, but like, I think this is maybe specific to Firesprite to some extent in the culture, but you can literally message anyone for help and they will take the time to help you. Like, I've messaged people on other projects I've never spoken to before, and they've gone like an hour trying to explain this complicated topic that nobody on my project knows, and they're just really helpful. Everyone's really nice, and also as well, everyone says the industry is really small, and you're like, okay, but like there's thousands of people, it can't be that small. On my project now, we've been working on it since an amount of months that I'm not allowed to say, but we've been adding, people have been joining, and all of a sudden people have been working, like every time somebody joins, at least 3 people on the team are like, yo, we worked together like 3 years ago, and I'm like, right? Or like on my last project, I can say this, we worked with Cloud PM Games on Star Citizen, and the lead on the game mode we were working on with them, and the lead on Firesprites, and had again worked together 10 years ago, and they had all these stories about like getting drunk together at parties and things like that. The industry is tiny.
Joey?
Yeah, everybody knows everybody. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, just when you enter the industry, you're going in as a graduate and a junior, and you see tons of people with years of experience, 5 years, 10 years, and you feel like a baby. You really do. Like, the amount of expertise people above you have that you can sort of absorb over time, it just creates a wonderful environment where you're just itching to get better at your work. You're already in this position where you're trusted and at a professional level, but you still have that room for improvement, and that's accepted and expected of you to have that room for improvement. Yeah, it's real cool. It can be quite scary, but everyone's there to help each other, so it's not too bad. You get to surround yourself with creative people, and that sort of feeds back onto you in a really nice way.
I think the one thing that actually did surprise me most about working with people who had been there for 10, 20, 30 years is imposter syndrome never goes away, and it turns out no one knows what they're doing.
Yep.
my game director on my project right now has like 2 or 3 decades of experience, and in a DM like 2 weeks ago after a presentation he gave, he messaged me saying, "Was that okay? I get really bad imposter syndrome about this stuff." This is a man who's as experienced as you can get. So yeah, just supporting that point.
Yeah. So, Charlie, our final words?
Oh yeah. I'll just say some stuff that my friend told me once, who's in the industry too. Everyone has gaps in their knowledge, and that's always a really great thing to keep in mind. Everyone's just struggling and trying to do their best. But it's good, and that is good.
So, on that note, I want to thank our panel for a really interesting sort of discussion. I hope it was really useful for you all. So, can we give the panel a round of applause?